Welcome to your readings for this last week of January. First month of the year is almost over. We're done, actually. After this week, we're done. Moving on into February, as usual, is a train that just keeps on rolling and there are no stops. So we get to either acclimate or not. There's a lot of interesting stuff. I'm finally getting through these readings here for the year. Lots of interesting stuff going on, lots of changes. One of the biggest things that I've noticed so far is we have 4 planets going retrograde at various different times. March, I think, is the first 2, and then later on in the summertime is the next 2, both starting in Aries and ending in Pisces. And that's kind of a weird coincidence. I'm not going to lie. Pisces is a very, energetic sign, but can be in a very aggressive sign. So in many cases, it does represent anger. And then we move into Pisces, which is more of an emotional influence. So it is a very strange coincidence, and not just that it's so many of them, there's 4 of them, but it's 2 and 2, one of which is a Mercury retrograde with a Venus retrograde within literally days of each other, earlier on in the year. So that is a very interesting coincidence. Other news, Uranus is finally leaving Taurus, and not for very long, because it's going to go retrograde and go back into Taurus. But after that, we should have less Taurus influence, more Gemini influence. So that's going to be interesting as well. As the fact that Neptune, the big news is that Neptune is actually finally leaving Pisces. Now, Neptune is, several years in a sign. Since I started doing astrology back in 2010, 2011, 2012, somewhere around there, Neptune has been in Pisces, just as Pluto has been in Capricorn. So Pluto's moving into Aquarius now, kind of going back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn. Neptune is going to start to do the same. It's actually moving into Aries, and is also one of those retrogrades. It's Neptune and Saturn together, which are going to move into Aries and then go retrograde and bounce back into Pisces again. So there's a lot of stuff happening astrologically this year. I did, kind of sort of, before I even looked into this, thought, man, this is going to be a year of change, and the planets are definitely backing that up. So with that being said, lots of really interesting stuff going on there. Let's get to the readings, and we're going to start with Darcy, like we always do, in case you did not listen to the intro, which you should, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. Uranus is leaving Taurus this year, not this month, not this week, not right now. It is going to be later on in the year, and it is going to come back. It's literally going to leave, go retrograde, and come back. So it doesn't, we'll have a few days off, basically, a few weeks off, more likely, before it comes back. But it's been in Taurus for 7 years. And Uranus is in a sign for 7 years at a time. So with that being said, we're going to be seeing Uranus leaving Taurus finally. It's been there. It's had its 7-year run. Like I said, it is going to go retrograde and come back for a while, spends a little bit more time, and then it's moving on into Gemini finally. So that's been an influence that has been there for a really long time for you. And it can be, in some cases, an easy influence. In some cases, it can be kind of a difficult influence, because Taurus is a fixed sign, doesn't really like change, very down to earth, likes to do things the way that they, have always done them. And Uranus is a very different influence to that. Also, this week, the big news is that Uranus is going direct. It's been retrograde now for quite a while. This week that ends, and it's actually moving direct. Now, for Taurus, Uranus being retrograde is a little bit easier to deal with, because sort of scales back into more traditional, solid ways of doing things like Taurus likes. When it goes retrograde, it's more rebellious, it's more out of the box, it's about coming up with ideas that you never tried before. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that it's um, that it's not necessary either. I think sometimes we get to a point where we have to do that. And I actually just had a client last week who is not a tourist, but was talking about how much she hates technology and how difficult it is for her to embrace technology, um, which is understandable. You get to a certain age, it's you're kind of past it. This is generationally we've seen this happen over and over again with various forms of technology. But the truth of the matter is that things keep rolling forward, and if you don't semi keep up with it, you get left behind, and pretty soon you can't function. So for instance, a really good example of this is actually my dad-in-law. He hasn't had a license in a really long time. And part of the reason why he hasn't had a license in a really long time is because since the pandemic, DMV has changed things. They want to minimize people coming in. And they're saying that for people over a certain age, all you have to do is go online, retake the test, no big deal. The man won't touch a computer to save his life. Okay. Or to get his license taken care of, right? So it took until he absolutely had to, because my mom-in-law had eye surgery and she couldn't drive, in order for her to just kind of sort of, sit there and do all the clicks and stuff like that while he answered the questions, because he still wouldn't touch the computer. If he didn't have that, he'd never have a license. My grandma's in the same boat. If she had to renew that license, and take that test online, she wouldn't do it. And there is absolutely nothing that could entice her to do that. So we do have to kind of keep up with the changes and how things are progressing in the world, or we get left behind. And getting left behind is not just oh, well, I don't do it technologically. No, actually, they're omitting the old way of doing it. And this is the way that we have to do it. And it doesn't matter how old we are, we have to figure that out, right? So we've got Uranus and Taurus. It is retrograde at the beginning of the week. By the end of the week, we are full on direct again. Focus is on self. And what's interesting about this is that as Uranus goes direct, the focus really is on your own rebellious nature and whether or not that's working for you or against you, because it can go either way, right? It continues to be in a grand sextile, two different grand sextiles, I should say. That same grand sextile with Pluto as well as Mercury, which is about to move into Aquarius this week as well. And Neptune, Venus, a little bit of Saturn there also. Saturn is involved just a little bit there, but it's mainly Neptune and Venus. All three planets focused on those that support you, while Pluto and Mercury are focused on your long-term career goals. So this is actually lining up at the perfect time. When you think about it, it's the beginning of the year. You're focused on your goals for the year. Obviously, your long-term career goals are definitely at the top of the list for most of us anyways. Those that support you, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on the circumstances, the timing, where they're at, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of feel that with this particular issue, we'll say, with this particular challenge there, the people that are there to support us can be really helpful with letting us know what it is that we're doing to destroy ourselves, because a lot of times we can't see it. And we can't see it because we're either looking at it emotionally, which clouds everything, or we just can't, most of the time we can't see what it is that we're doing to destroy ourselves. So people come in to assist with that. And no, not there isn't a single one of us, I don't think, that really enjoys hearing what we're doing to screw up our lives, but we really need to know what it is that we're doing to screw up our lives in order to be able to make a change for the better. So I feel like in this particular instance here, we're taking stock of ourselves. What are we doing to get in our own way? We are getting some assistance from other people so that we can get that outside view of what we're doing to get in our own way in order to achieve those goals. So it is actually very helpful in the long run when you think about it. Uranus is also in a grand sextile with Mars, which is focused on the mind and how the mind works. And Mars is still retrograde at this time, and with Saturn and Venus and Neptune, which are focused on those that support you. So this particular aspect here really kind of feels like, again, we're sort of taking ourselves out of it, and kind of sort of looking at an outside viewpoint from others, because with Mars being retrograde in that particular spot, it kind of sort of feels like, your brain's just not working. You're just not able to come up with an answer for yourself. And in those instances, that's why it becomes a lot easier to have that outside help. The thing about the outside help, though, is you have to be very picky and choosy about who you get that help from. Trust is a big deal, obviously. We have to make sure that we're getting that assistance from people that don't have their own motives in mind. So they're not giving you advice on what you should do to help them necessarily, because that is a thing. So in my experience, I have specific people that I go to that I know are going to tell me the truth and tell me what I need to hear that's in my best interest. That is really, really important. Everybody else, I take their opinions with a grain of salt, because I don't know 100% whether or not their motives are genuine or not. And that, of course, is a very important piece of that puzzle there. I'm going to pull a card for you, and I have the Seven of Cups in reverse. And I like how it's kind of a, if you look at the card, let me see if I can do this. It's a wizard, and he has all the elements in the cups, and the devil is in there, and of course that all-powerful unicorn is in there, and they're all just kind of floating around. It's almost like a Russian roulette, if that makes sense. And of course we're talking about cups, so we're talking about emotional stuff as well. The Seven of Cups in this position indicates order, understanding, priorities in perspective, clear judgment. So this is actually a really good card. This is, basically saying that if you do these things and really pay attention to them and focus on them, yes, criticism can be emotional, but we have to look at this in a logical way and not an emotional way, right? So we're not getting defensive because we're being told that what we're doing is wrong. We're taking into consideration what other people are seeing so that we can be the judge of whether or not we can use that to our advantage, or we need to eliminate it because it's getting in our way. This card right here is literally just the confirmation of that. So that's actually pretty darn good, I would have to say. That is what I have for you. I did send an invoice out for your yearly reading. So please shoot me a text message and let me know if you need me to resend it. So that I can take care of that. I'm trying my damnedest to get all of these readings done, and I really need to have them done by the end of the week, if at all possible. So that's what I have for you. Moving on to Kendra. Got some news doing the yearly readings, and got some news here about the astrology for the upcoming year. And the big thing, of course, is Uranus is finally leaving Taurus. Not for very long, unfortunately, but it is actually getting ready to leave Taurus. It will leave Taurus later on this year, move into Gemini, go retrograde, and then wind up coming back into Taurus. But we're actually at the point where Uranus is moving out of Taurus. Uranus has been in Taurus for 7 years. So our 7 years is pretty much up. We are going to toggle back and forth, I think, a little bit for the next couple of years, but the bulk of his being in Taurus is over this year, is ending this year, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it can be kind of a heavy influence. What's happening this week is that Uranus is going direct. So it's been retrograde now for several months. We're ending that retrograde by the end of the week. I tend to think that Uranus retrograde in Taurus is a little bit easier to handle than Uranus direct, because Taurus is a fixed sign, an earth sign. We're talking down to earth. We're talking kind of structured and scheduled and not liking to deviate from that. And Uranus, especially when it's direct, is like, no, we don't keep to a schedule. We rebel against authority. We, have to come up with out of the box ideas, because tradition, just throw tradition out the window. It's not a comfortable influence in many cases. But then again, we kind of need to be thrown out of our comfort zones every now and then in order to evolve and grow. So Uranus is very helpful for that, even if he's uncomfortable in many cases. He is in two different grand sextiles still, with no challenges here, which is good. He continues in that grand sextile with Neptune and Venus and a little bit of Saturn there, which are all focused on those you love. I'm sorry, those that support you, as well as Pluto, with some influences of Mercury, as well as Mercury moves into Aquarius this week. And those two influences are focused on long-term career goals, while Taurus and Uranus are focused on self. This is you getting yourself ready for your next steps, your next goals. Really, Pluto, especially your source of power, and Mercury, all about communication and what you're willing to do to get what you want. These are really big influences here. And I think that Uranus going direct at this time really is helpful for you, because it's sort of putting you in a position to embrace the fact that you have to do something different than what you have been doing. Not to say that you haven't been doing something different up until now, because that's not true, but this is really going out of the box. And in some cases, there's a risk there, which can be really, really scary. But you're not doing it alone, because you have Saturn, you have Venus, you have Neptune, all of which are bringing that focus of support from others around you into play here. And we're not just talking about your husband supporting you. We're talking about gathering a support system from I'm literally seeing it from various different places, right? Whether it's your current job, or a job that you had before, or somebody that you were going to partner with that has all of a sudden resurfaced. These people seem to be popping up and saying, hey, yes, this is a great idea. Let's all get on board and do this. So that's pretty fantastic. Uranus is also in a grand sextile with Neptune, Venus, and Saturn still, as well as Mars. Mars is focused on the mind and how the mind works, and it's retrograde. So we're not talking overly emotional thought process. We're not talking overly angry thought process. But we could also be talking about brain fog. You know what I'm talking about, when you just have those days where, for whatever reason, it feels like your brain just doesn't seem to be working at all. And you're like, what the hell, but that's where the support system comes in. This is not all on you. And I think that that's what really makes this different than it ever was before. This is not all you dealing with this, with your husband going, yeah, sure, I'll support whatever it is that you want to do. No, this is this is different. You're building a team here. And that's actually the word here of the day is team. You're building a team here that's going to help you collaborate and be able to help you get the work done in order to move forward and succeed in those goals. So everything is just kind of lining up for you to move forward this year. Now, that being said, I have been, in case you missed the intro, I have been for months now thinking 2025, there's going to be a lot of change in 2025. And in sitting down and finally getting to the yearly readings, because I have so flipping much on my plate right now, it's not even funny. And I'm trying to get through these so at least they're not on my plate. I have found that there is a lot of change coming out astrologically this year, including which is fascinating is we have the first Mercury retrograde in March, starting in Aries, ending in Pisces. Within days, Venus goes retrograde, also in Aries, ending in Pisces. Go forward a few months, and we actually have Neptune leaving Pisces. Neptune's been in Pisces since I started doing astrology back in like 2011, 2012, something like that. It's finally moving into Aries, but it goes retrograde and right back into Pisces, right alongside Saturn that is doing the same thing. So we have 4 planets going retrograde in Aries and ending in Pisces, 2 at a time, 2 different times. To me, this is a very significant synchronicity here, right? Because Aries tends to be very energetic, yes, but it tends to be very aggressive. And Pisces tends to be very emotional. And to me, this is just like what happens when you get into an argument with somebody. What happens? You get angry, you sit in that anger for a long time, and then you fall into a despair. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Not exactly 100% sure what that is going to look like necessarily, but I can say that the first thing that popped into my head around this particular situation is that I read something on Facebook the other day that said the only person that's going to save me is the version of me that's sick and tired of my own shit. And that is exactly what that felt like. It's creating these situations in order for that version of you to step up and go, that's it. We're not doing this anymore. We're going to do something completely different here. The High Priestess in reverse is the card that I chose for you. And I cannot even believe that. Because so there's a couple of things here. First of all, when I do pull a card for myself from this deck, it's almost always the High Priestess. And when she comes up to me upright, I am on the right path. I'm doing, I am, whatever it is that I'm doing it for the highest good of everybody, not just myself. When the High Priestess comes to me in reverse, she's kind of like, you better watch yourself, little girl, because, either I am manipulating things to my advantage and not taking into consideration everybody else. There's also that element of I'm not standing in my power and feeling powerful. I'm sitting in my misery going, why me? Why is this happening to me? And with the amount of change that's taking place, it can very easily go one way or another. Everything around me personally right now is a shit show. I'm not kidding. Okay. I have so much on my plate, so many changes sitting right in front of me that I got to take care of. Nobody around me seems to be taking on their responsibilities. It is a nightmare. I mean, an absolute nightmare. And it's so easy to fall into that despair place. And I think that this week, this is what this is really about. When you get overwhelmed and you just go, I don't know what to do, and you freak out, and then you get pulled down into that despair place. And you know what? It is not going to help you. Okay. Just had a conversation with my husband this morning while he was freaking out. And I said, you freaking out is not going to help you. We need to come up with a solution, not panic and get all about it. Right. So I really feel that that's what this card is saying to you. I don't feel that you're trying to manipulate situations to your advantage and your advantage only. That's not what's happening here. It's more, rather than standing in your power, you're feeling powerless, which unfortunately is not going to do you any good. So we know how powerful you are. And if you can't see that or feel that, then pull it from me, because I know how powerful you are. Okay. So that is what I have for you. Moving on to Jeannette, taking a look ahead into the year. Some interesting things are happening, including Uranus moving into Gemini, which it's been in Taurus for 7 years. So we're finally moving out of that Taurus influence into Gemini. No, it's going to move into Gemini, go retrograde, and go right back into Taurus. But Uranus in Gemini makes a hell of a lot more sense than Uranus and Taurus. Uranus is Aquarius's planet, kind of a rebellious influence in many ways, likes to blow things up and start over, likes to dance to its own tune, not necessarily everybody else's. Uranus is not a follow the crowd kind of an influence any more than Aquarius is. What's interesting for you is that it is leaving the influence of your husband and moving into an influence to you, which I think is going to be a lot more comfortable for you than it has been for him. In a lot of ways anyways. Now we're talking months from now. That's not happening today, but it is something that is going to be happening later on in the year. I think around July, and some point in July, but don't quote me on that. We do still have Jupiter. Jupiter will be leaving Gemini at some point because it only stays a year in a sign. So we've already had it there for a while. It's definitely be moving on to Cancer at some point. Jupiter is still retrograde this week, and I do not believe, no, it's not. It's retrograde is not ending by the end of the week, which is semi unfortunate, and is what it is at the same time. So we do have that going for us as well. Jupiter's focus is on self in many ways. Gemini's focus is on self as well, but there's also an element of the past there. But Jupiter's focus continues to be on self all through the week. And we do have a little bit of a challenge at the beginning of the week when the moon is in Sagittarius at the beginning of the week. So it moves into opposition with Jupiter. And since Jupiter and the moon are also squared with Saturn and Venus and Neptune, which are all focused on those that support you, this is a bit of a challenge right at the beginning of the week, but it's a challenge that lasts for a day, not the whole week, which is really good. The moon's focus is on money. So we're really talking about money issues here, or even in some cases, because this is only a day's worth of a thing, we're looking at maybe panicking over money, mini panics over money. We have them all the time, right? And it's definitely a panic because the moon is the one that's bringing this focus to light here. As we move into Monday, that challenge basically disappears, and we're not necessarily dealing with it in the same way. But Jupiter is still in a square with Saturn, at least for the first few days of the week, creating a challenge where it feels like you're trying to rely on somebody who's just not taking on the responsibility that they need to be taking on, right? And you can't grow as an individual because, of course, Jupiter continues to be retrograde. So there's two things here about that are really, really important to keep in mind and remember. Number one, Personal growth does not rely on other people. Okay. Yes, your personal finances and stuff like that. If you have a partner, you have to work together. Totally get that. But your own personal growth, your own what you need to do for you, that is not reliant on anybody else. Whether you're married, have children, best friends, does not matter. Okay. That is all on you. And I think that there's a lot of elements in the world of people saying, well, I was going to do this, but I couldn't because, and there's always somebody there to point the finger at somebody else, right? And the truth is that there is no growth without personal responsibility. There goes my damn phone. 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm really sorry about that. Don't remember where we left off. So I'm just going to not start over so much. We did talk about this challenge the beginning of the week. Let's talk about the good stuff now. Let's talk about some good stuff now because Jupiter has moved into a trine with Mercury. Is that Mercury? Yes, it is. Actually, it's no. It's not Mercury. It is the sun. It's the sun, which is in Aquarius right now. So, trine, they're both in the same element. They're working very closely together. The sun's focus is on career and legacy and stepping into who you want to be. What's going to happen? We're going to finish this before we decide to do any more pausing. Okay. So that's a good thing. I think in some cases Jupiter's retrograde here is sort of working in your favor because the Gemini way is to focus on everything at once, which is a little bit daunting and overwhelming. So we're sort of condensing that down to focus on just one thing at a time. And I think that, in all honesty, for any intellectual especially, that's exactly what you need to do. All of that overthinking it and over planning and all of that, it makes for a garbled mess inside your head, and that just doesn't help anybody. I'm going to pull a card for you. I'm so sorry I had to pause in the middle of your reading. One more shuffle here. Definitely see some forward movement coming. There's a lot of changes I think that are taking place this year, but this first month has been a serious adjustment, like hard adjustment. And it's almost like the feeling that I get from it is that all of the unresolved stuff that you had, you better take care of it now. And if you have a lot, it's really overwhelming. The Page of Wands is the card that I picked for you. And the Page of Wands in this position indicates young, enthusiastic person, strong will, and determination. And I think that that's a perfect energy to put into your most important goals, which is a money situation, but also your health at the same time. That's really, really, really important as well. So that is what I have for you. I'm going to pause again, and then hopefully not anymore after this. Okay, moving on to Connie. Let's take a look. We got nothing going on in Leo, which is just awesome for you, Leos. There's no planets in Leo, no moon in Leo. We've already been there, done that, nothing. Focus is on the home at this time with very little to influence that, which is kind of nice. It's not saying that you don't have things, obviously, that you need to deal with and take care of outside of the home. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your focus just should be on the home in terms of organizing, cleaning up, etc., etc. However, I think that this is more shifting the focus to your foundation. I think after a while, I can sort of see where we get this so overwhelmed with everything that is going on in life that we forget what the initial goal was, the initial plan was, why we set out to do what we're doing, or direction. And this is kind of one of those opportunities to go back to the beginning, to go back to that, to, you know, as impossible as it is to shake off all the bullshit, especially the bullshit that you're not currently dealing with right now, and just focus on the steps that you need to take from here on out. Whether it's the steps you need to take care of your responsibilities, whether it's the steps that you need to take for your success in your career, or to make money, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be one thing or another. It's what's most important to you, I think. I also do get a sense a little bit that maybe this week there's more home time, which means more time to focus on your goals and rebuilding that foundation. But also more time to be home to organize how things are streamlined, if that makes sense. And streamlining is not just in business. I think that people who are highly organized people streamline everything because it just makes it so much easier. And that includes your own self-care in a way. And honestly, I think this is a great week for that as well, because there's not really a whole lot coming in to influence that or take your take your focus away from that. There's even a bit of a rest break in there as well, if that makes sense. The card I am pulling for you is the Five of Swords. And the Five of Swords in this position indicates threat of jealousy and betrayal, trouble with an old enemy. This is interesting, actually, because while having a semi-clear schedule and being able to focus on, this is almost a reminder of what has happened in the past. You have the time to focus. And the old enemy could be other people. Yes, it's true. But it could also be you. And the fact that it's still difficult to let go of it. And the more you think about it, the more exhausted you get. And the more exhausted you get, the more unmotivated you get. Or you're trying to push yourself and motivate through all of the exhaustion, which is not as productive as it could be. I kind of feel like it's really important to set boundaries on yourself, if that makes sense. And to really work hard to maintain those boundaries without forgetting. Because the honest truth is that the more space that the bullshit takes up, the less energy you have to put into what you want to do, or quite frankly, what you need to do. And while I do get the sense that it is hard to let go of it, it doesn't mean that it is impossible to let go of it, at least temporarily. You don't have to let go of it forever. You're just sort of telling yourself, I can't deal with that right now. I can't be angry at my family and all of the things and go through the list of things that they've done to me right now, because that is not the proper focus for my energy. I need to focus my energy in this more productive path. It's a self-sabotage for us to use these things as an excuse to keep us from doing what needs to get done. I see this self-sabotage everywhere. I've been there. I've lived it myself. It does not do anything for the situation. And I think that that's what this card is just reminding us of, is that basically nothing gets done without us putting the time and the effort and the focus into it, which means that our focus cannot be taken up somewhere else. So that is what I have for you this week. Moving on to Jenny, focus is on the home. There's nothing to influence that. There's nothing to get in the way of that. And being that it is the last week of the month before tax season officially starts, some time relaxing at home is not a bad idea. I think it lines up perfectly to be that way, actually. Because you got to take the time when you can, and, as and when you can. I even am shown, obviously you can't drop responsibilities because other responsibilities become bigger or more important. I'm not really saying that, but you can reschedule or even move things around and let things that are not that important, that have to be done right now, go and wait a little bit longer, if that makes sense. It's kind of a weird thing, I think, that we humans do when we go to extremes. We either have to do everything and kill ourselves to do it, or do nothing and destroy ourselves to do it, when it really is all about prioritization, I think, more than anything else. It's prioritizing what needs to get done and what can wait until later. The other thing that I'm kind of picking up on a little bit is being more vocal with the people around you in terms of needing assistance. I think in some cases there isn't a problem, and in some cases there is a problem. And I'm not saying that you do this, but just in case, avoid the fishing. Avoid being in that situation where you're like, gosh, it would be really cool if somebody would help me every now and then, because people don't always respond to that. It's, my son kind of taught me that in a way. My neighbor was moving and came to ask him, my youngest, to help him get a big heavy piece of furniture into a trailer or something like that, which he did do. He was direct. Can you come help me move this piece of furniture into this trailer? My son went over there and did it. And then he said, you wouldn't want to ride for an hour and a half with me to unload this trailer, would you? And then I'll bring you back, which is basically a 4-hour trip by the time they're done. And because he said you wouldn't want to, my son said, nope, I would not want, you're right, I would not want to do that. So it gave him an out, which of course he jumped on, he took immediately. And I think that, a lot of times, even I've been in that situation, well, where, I've asked somebody, is there something that I can help with? Well, I'm just doing this and this and this and this and this and this. Okay, that didn't answer my question, so I'm not going to offer again, right? In some cases, it's a stubbornness thing. In other cases, it's just people are people. If you give them an out, they're going to take it most of the time. So that can be within your office, that can be between you and the girls, that can be other people in various different organizations that you're with. Just when you get overwhelmed, just ask. I think some people, it's true, some people it's easier than others to talk to. And there's various, I know with kids especially, there's always those various levels of guilt, like I'm the mom, I'm supposed to be able to do everything. But I also do remind myself too that I'm doing them a disservice by constantly mothering them. I mean, my kids are grown men now. It's not exactly healthy for them, for me to be doing that. And with your girls, they need to be able, that's part of us teaching them to be responsible in many ways. So we should kind of look at it that way and take it into consideration as well. It does make it a little bit easier, I think. I have pulled the Two of Wands in reverse for you. This is actually in your reading, which I am almost done with. Oh my God. That one is in your reading. Probably around March or April, May, somewhere in that area over there. The Two of Wands in this position indicate strong differences of opinion. Ask for help and get strong differences of opinion. I think that's actually half the reason why we strong, independent women don't ask for help, because we're sick and tired of fighting with people to get it. I totally get that. I absolutely 100% on board with you on that. It's frustrating. It's frustrating as hell, and nobody ever sees everything that we do. They don't see it. They don't acknowledge it. Do they care about it? I don't know, but it feels like you might as well just not even ask, because you're going to get this whole long drawn out, bullshit from people. I do understand that. And everybody's on edge. In doing your reading, I knew that 2025 was going to be a pivotal year full of change. But I didn't realize astrologically the extent of where that change is going. And it is very interesting how things are lining up. And for specifics, there is some specifics in the intro that it's not necessarily 100% affecting Leo. But some major planets who've been sitting in signs for a really long time are moving out of those signs. And that's going to change things. There's 4 retrogrades, 2 at a time, that are moving into, they're moving into retrograde, starting in Aries and into Pisces. That's a very aggressive and very aggressive into deep emotional, space or trauma. And I think that these things have to happen in order for these changes to take place. And I don't necessarily think that they're changes that, we're making these major move changes. It's changes into ourselves. When we always get to a space, because it's just plain human nature, to where we think, okay, I've gotten past all of this stuff, so there's nothing, no more growth for me, nothing more that I need to learn. And then we get a wake-up call that that's not true. And unfortunately, I think as we're moving through the changes, it's these forced changes that are either going to push us into making a change that we've been putting off for a long time, or forcing us to see what we need to see, which we've been kind of putting off, if that makes any sense at all. So bottom line is, this week, rest as much as you can and ask for help to get things done. You don't have to be Superwoman. Nobody asked you to be Superwoman. That's what I have for you. Moving on to Linda. We do not have any planets in Virgo this week. The dark moon is on the cusp of Virgo, but even all the way into the end of the week, not quite in Virgo, but it is still being on the cusp. It is still kind of felt a little bit. She is retrograde. If she continues to be retrograde next week, she'll definitely be full on in Virgo next week. The dark moon is all about making drastic changes. I think in some cases, because she's known as the dark moon, a lot of it has to do with emotional decision making, which is not always the best way to do things. We tend to make snap decisions or make the wrong decisions when we're making them based on how we feel in the moment. And since this is all pointing towards family, it's definitely something that you want to avoid as much as you possibly can, because it just causes a family argument and a family fight that will go on for as long as it can possibly go on when you think about it. So I feel like really that influence here this week, it's going to be felt more towards the end of the week than it is in the beginning of the week, because she is 1 degree in Libra right on Saturday, on the 1st of the month, and which is part of more the Libra side of the cusp, but the cusp nonetheless. The beginning of the week seems to be more like, you're just kind of making plans and doing your thing and everything is great, and then you get to the end of the week and there's kind of a mess, and to be honest with you, there's a lot of triggers in the mess. In fact, this situation that you have gone through over the last couple of years with your one daughter and her husband, there's been a whole lot of triggers in that, I think, which is why it can be so difficult to deal with that situation, if that makes sense. The other thing that I'm picking up on is because there's not a lot of influence from other planets, it's not so much that it's a light week. So I don't see that so much. But I don't see any major disruptions either, or delays or anything like that. Now I'm going to pull a card. Let's just see what that says. But it kind of feels like it runs smoothly up until certain conversations start happening. And I think that it could be easier depending on the way you handle it, because you can't avoid it only. You can't avoid it, but you can minimize how big the fire is. So it is like that. I mean, obviously, a disagreement or words, let's say, between you and your daughter can be a small fire. If you put water on the fire, you diffuse the fire. If you put gasoline on the fire, you make it a much bigger fire. And, the words that you use are the water and or the gasoline. So it sucks, because in many cases, in situations like that, it's like, well, you know what? That person should see what they're doing. But we have to be the bigger person, right? We're the adult in the situation when it comes to communicating with our children, right? And whether or not we feel they're open and receptive to learn, it's still our responsibility to be the example that we want them to follow eventually. I have the Four of Cups in reverse that I have chosen for you. And the Four of Cups in reverse indicates motivation, ability to work out disappointing relationships and work situations. That's confirmation for you that it is all in your power. You can put the fire out or make a bigger fire. It's completely and totally up to you. So that's what I have for you. I will be talking to you tomorrow, which probably by the time you watch this, we have already done talked. So moving on to Matalyn, there's no planets in Virgo this week. Focus is on family, those you love. The dark moon is getting very, very, very close to the cusp of Virgo. Not quite there yet. Oh, pardon me. Not quite there yet, but very, very, very close. 1 degree in Libra, which means the following day, Sunday, Monday, the dark moon will be in Virgo retrograde. So you will already be able to feel the effects of that towards the end of the week, but probably not until towards the end of the week. Because there's really not a lot of influence there. Focus being on family can go a multitude of different ways. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. In some cases, we do get to choose that. In some cases, not quite so much, because we have to deal with and react to everybody around us. But that's really the lesson there, is the dealing with and reacting to everybody around us can be a really, really, really big, huge distraction. And my phone is ringing. Speaking of huge distractions, I'm going to pause for just a second. I'm really sorry. Okay. Family can be a distraction. That's where we left off on. Literally all fucking day. And take it from me, it can be all too easy to go, oh my God, if I didn't have to deal with these people, I could get so much more done. And you know what? Today, to be honest with you, that is the truth. Absolutely. I have a long list of shit that needs to get done, and I am really struggling to get through it. It's 5:15 p.m. now. I started recording at 1 something in the afternoon, and I'm already halfway through. I get it. But I have a brand new client in 45 minutes, and I have to finish this, and it has to be done, and I have other obligations that need to be taken care of. There is so much. I have used my family as an excuse as to why I'm not further along than I am right now, and it hasn't really gotten me anywhere. So the only thing that I really can do is just keep going and keep putting one foot in front of the other. And that's what you got to do. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And do yourself a favor and never, ever, ever put yourself in the position of fixing everything for everybody, because you know what? You just can't. And the only thing that you get is everybody comes to you all the time to fix their damn problems instead of figuring it out on their own. And then it just blows up from there. Sure, you'll hear all about it soon enough from Daniel. Seven of Swords in reverse is the card that I have pulled for you. Return of something lost or taken. Resolution of conflicts. Well, that's good, right? Wouldn't mind that card for myself right now, to be honest with you. That is what I have for you, darling. And I am going to stop right here and do the rest of them on a second video because I have to meet with a client in a half an hour. So I will see everybody in video number 2 this week.